Between 1996 and 1997, Albania witnessed one of the most deadly riots in the nation's history. The riots, triggered by the collapse of Albania's pyramid schemes, had led to civil uprising between protesters and government agencies. By the end of the crisis, Albania's parliament had resigned after losing the country's southern region to the protesters. In this video, we'll look at what caused Albania's financial collapse and how it led to a near-violent overthrow of the country's government. How pyramid schemes work. Before we can understand the political instability that led to Albania's civil uprising in 1996 and 1997, we need to understand what pyramid schemes are and how they operate. These schemes are among the most popular financial scams today, but how do they even work? A pyramid scheme is a type of scam that relies on constantly recruiting new investors. Such schemes usually masquerade as investment companies, but they have no real assets. Instead, they make money by constantly recruiting new investors and promising them extremely high returns. The promise of high returns to new investors makes a pyramid scheme profitable to its owners. Usually, the offer looks too good to be true, so new investors are easily tempted. Returns are paid to new investors from the money from older investors, which creates a financial bubble. Of course, the bubble created by pyramid schemes collapse at some point as the company's liabilities outweighs its portfolio, i.e., the amount owed to investors would grow beyond how much the company is generating from new investors. When such pyramid schemes collapse, the company steals whatever is left in its portfolio, leaving a trail of defrauded customers and sometimes economic collapse. One of the most popular pyramid schemes in recent times was an investment scheme called Mavrodi Mondial Movement. This scheme operated in several countries, including Russia and China, before relocating to Africa. In the usual pyramid scheme fashion, MMM would promise new investors high returns. They will also promise extra returns on whatever amount they could convince a new investor to put in the scheme. As a result, MMM ensured that its customers were the most eager to bring in new recruits. Its latest victim is Nigeria, the most populous African nation. At the time of its collapse, MMM made hundreds of millions of dollars from defrauded Nigerian investors, many of whom were low-income earners and working-class individuals. Given the danger involved, many countries are proactive in the prevention and control of pyramid schemes. As such, most pyramid schemes do not have a major impact on a country's economy, except for Albania, which was far from lucky. The rise of Albania's pyramid schemes. For Albania, the era of pyramid schemes was one of its most traumatic. The country was already struggling when the pandemic of pyramid schemes hit, and it wiped out almost $1.2 billion of Albanian household savings. Albania started the long transition of moving from an isolated communist nation to a parliamentary democracy in 1992. Therefore, the country had no formal financial system, and its citizens did not understand how financial markets worked. The government was also failing in its civic responsibility, which caused a lot of political and economic unrest. Albania's financial situation reached a point where citizens needed more credit facilities than the government could provide. This led to an informal financial sector, largely created to suit the demands for loans and credit facilities. The informal financial sector was created from savings collected from citizens. As it was an informal sector, there was no regulation, meaning almost anyone could operate such lending houses. The lack of regulation was no problem at first, but in time, the government would look back with regrets on its failure to create the necessary regulation to protect its economy from pyramid schemes. Soon after informal lending houses were opened, deposit-taking companies started popping up. These companies would offer citizens crazy returns on their investments, not minding whether their interest rates were sustainable. Even worse, most of these deposit-taking institutions would invest rather than give out loans, which meant they carried more risk. But the returns were crazy, so they got a lot of patronage from many hapless Albanians. Soon, informal deposit-taking facilities got so popular that high-ranking government officials publicly associated with them. Some of these companies also funded election campaigns for the ruling Democratic Party. By 1996, their signs revealed a bubble in this informal financial sector. The government tried to counteract by attempting to pass a bill that empowered the Central Bank of Albania to close illegal deposit-taking facilities. Unfortunately, the bill was as good as dead, because there was no real political backing from individuals in government, many of whom were closely associated with these illegal deposit-taking facilities. Ultimately, no serious action was taken, and helpless Albanian citizens continued to pour their hard-earned savings into these illegal financial institutions. Unfortunately for many Albanians, there was no government protection from these illegal enterprises. As a result, most pyramid schemes operated with little to no oversight from government officials. The Albanian government even failed to provide appropriate warnings to its citizens about the dangers. The collapse and its aftermath. The real trouble began by late 1995. The United Nations suspended sanctions placed on Yugoslavia, ending the profit from smuggling for some deposit-taking companies. By early 1996, these companies began raising interest rates on lending by about 5 to 6% per month, while annual inflation was between 5 to 17%. These companies didn't mind the worsening economic situation. Rather, they were fixated on the profits generated from their schemes. As such, they ignored the danger signs of the ailing economy and chose to focus on increasing profits generated from these kind of schemes. The economic uncertainty at the time also made regular Albanians more susceptible to these scams. As parliamentary elections were approaching, Albania was filled with uncertainty, so these companies increased interest rates again, this time around 8% per month, and a real annual rate of more than 100%. At this critical time, two new pyramid schemes emerged, Populi and Zafari. Both companies seemed to be enough competition for Sud, one of Albania's leading deposit-taking companies at the time. So Sud increased its interest rates to a crazy 12 to 19% per month. The two new boys on the block, Zafari and Populi, had almost 2 million depositors. With Albania's population just around 3.5 million, this development scared other deposit takers, including Sud. By September, Populi began increasing interest rates by over 30% monthly. Many Albanians in a state of financial uncertainty and anxiety couldn't resist the offers from these pyramid schemes. Many regular citizens sold their homes to invest in the companies. Albania's agricultural sector also took a big loss, as farmers would slaughter their livestock to invest the proceeds in pyramid schemes. Sadly for these citizens, their government watched idly even as the situation reached a point where almost 45% of their GDP was tied up in pyramid schemes. Even though the IMF had warned the Albanian government, the government didn't warn their people on time. The beginning of the end came when Sud suddenly collapsed, creating huge public shock and thus halting new deposits. Others like Vefa, Canberry, Silva and Senaj lowered interest rates to 5%, hoping to convince the public of their soundness. Unfortunately, the move failed. Sud Angelica then declared bankruptcy, a move that triggered some of the most violent riots in the country's history. Almost immediately, other deposit-taking companies announced a pause on all withdrawals. The government had made some moves to halt the impending chaos. First, it refused to compensate depositors, making stabilizing the economy easier. It then froze accounts of some of the largest illegal financial institutions. It also limited daily withdrawals to prevent the pyramid schemes from emptying their accounts. Unfortunately, the chaos was way out of hand already. By March 1997, protesters had taken control of the country's southern region. They had also stolen over 1 million weapons from the country's armory. Albanians fled the country in droves as over 2,000 people died. The Albanian parliament had to resign and the president promised to hold new parliamentary elections. By the end of June, the interim government was sworn in. They had to make big moves to stabilize the country. The economy and political situation stabilized with the help from the IMF and other international bodies. Unfortunately, some of these pyramid schemes still survived, largely because many old parliamentarians had invested in these schemes. Besides, the operators of these schemes were fighting hard to hold on to their assets. By July 1997, the government passed a bill allowing them to appoint foreign administrators to manage these companies until their assets were sold. The administrators were part of a collaboration with the World Bank and the IMF. Unfortunately, the owners of these companies would not give up without a fight. Most would frustrate the process, including challenging the new law in court. They would also intimidate foreign administrators with threats of violence. When the administrators finally took over these companies, most of their assets had been lost or sold. Most of the owners of these companies were either arrested or fled the country. The pyramid scheme era had severe consequences on both the economy and the political stability of Albania. As a result, the government had to take bold and radical moves to ensure the nation's stability. One of those moves included not bailing out depositors. Of course, these moves left thousands of people bankrupt, poor, and even homeless. But it was vital to ensuring that economic policies would be sustainable as they recovered. The new government also tackled the budget deficit and implemented structural changes that were key to the appreciation of Albania's currency, the lek. So what made Albania so susceptible to the influence of pyramid schemes? Albania's case was that of a nation in a slow but major economic transition. An economic situation that created a vacuum that was quickly exploited by criminality. The country started with a weak financial system, creating opportunities for lending facilities. Such institutions then emerged. Unfortunately, greedy companies took advantage of this people-driven initiative. At the height of it all, farmers and other workforce members were selling their assets to invest in pyramid schemes because of the crazy interest rates they offered. As a result, thousands were killed in the civil unrest. Thousands more lost their savings, homes, and even sources of income, thanks to the evil of pyramid schemes. We've gotten to the end of today's video. I hope you learned a thing or two about pyramid schemes. If you want to learn how budget airlines are able to survive even with extremely low ticket prices, then click on this video. Thanks for watching and see you next time.